Okay, I'm going to provide just some general thoughts and notes related to evaluation. The first thing I want to mention is with the chapter that we had for this week related to evaluation. The author begins with a kind of a story about a project that they worked on where it was having a positive effect, but they didn't feel that it was conveyed in the reports or the evaluation. And so, what I thought would be important to illustrate with this is that the evaluation section is a really important time to look back at your objectives, your goals and objectives section, but primarily the objectives because that's what you're trying to measure, and to reevaluate those and see if you want to change them or tweak them. So, one example would be, let's say you had an objective that was like recruit 3 staff members to oversee part of the program or something. Well, that's if you only have 3 or 4, objectives, even 5 or 6. I mean, that one really, I mean, it's measurable in the sense that you could check it off when you have 3 members, but it's not really something you're measuring significantly over time that's contributing to the overall progress of the program or project. So what you would want to do, I think, is rethink that in terms of putting that as an activity and making your objective a little bit more broader, a little more deeply connected to the overall goal of the project that you're trying to propose. So reevaluate your objectives. So the objectives are going to be the primary focus of the evaluation plan, although you might include more measures and more things that you want to include in your evaluation plan. A big part of the chapter that we read was about the use of an external evaluator. I don't think that's really relevant. You could technically, especially if you have a volunteer, it'd be really great to try to find somebody who maybe has good credentials and would agree to try to help out with your project in terms of doing the evaluation. But generally, big federal grants, which I've tried to steer you away from, there you would include an external evaluator and the grant would pay for it. It would be something you would include in your budget. Here, that's not something that foundation grants are really going to pay for. So if you had somebody that volunteered, they would do it. External evaluators can be really positive because in the eyes of the funder, you're talking about a third party, presumably, hopefully more objective person who's going to evaluate the program and give you feedback. The benefit of having somebody internally, though, is that you're going to have somebody who you're working with who's giving you feedback and that you can talk with and kind of work through the evaluation. It's important. I always use the term formative and summative. In the book, they use process, and then they put often called formative, and then they use outcome, and then they say also called summative. Process or outcome evaluation, both are really, really essential to address in the evaluation section. Your formative or process means you're evaluating along the way, gathering feedback, and then using that in some sort of way to make corrections if things are not going as planned. So you would basically just want to have a kind of process in place where you're trying to collect some form of data on a monthly basis. This could be internally with your staff, with your participants. It could just be sort of some measures that you look at in terms of are you meeting certain objectives if you listed activities and the dates for them? Are you completing them in a timely manner? If they're not completed, what's your contingency plan for working on them? It's to make sure the project gets completed effectively. To give you an example of this, a project that I just worked on, a grant-funded project for the Department of State, as our summative, data collection, we did an initial evaluation that included surveys, focus groups, and some other, qualitative and quantitative measures. And then we did evaluation at the end to compare that data and the changes that took place over time. And that's how we really kind of got the bulk of our summative data. The formative data, we did focus groups each week of the program. And then we did periodic, surveys that were less involved in the initial and the post, the pre and the post survey. Those are two good terms to know too, pre and post surveys or data collection. And another important term I think that you could include would be baseline data. So your pre-assessment would give you your baseline data, and then you would seek to measure your outcomes. I can tell you that, as one example, federal grants, like with the Department of Education, most of the grant programs that I'm aware of, things like the TRIO program, like you cannot get funded unless you go into it with sufficient baseline data. So you already have to have your baseline data up front. And for TRIO, as one example, like you have to know your graduation rates. You have to know how many students like in your school district or the districts that are in your proposed project, how many students are applying for post-secondary education, what the retention rates are. All that needs to be fleshed out. And then you set your objectives with your baseline data and then the change you. So everything's very, very measured, very specific. So yeah, I would think about using both qualitative and quantitative measures. And, qualitative doesn't always have to be over, it doesn't have to be, a regression analysis or something that in depth. For bigger projects, it can be certainly, but even just, the specific number of participants you'll serve, you can use something like a Likert scale, within your surveys to show satisfaction with the project or different factors like that. And then qualitative measures, I think, are also really important, especially when you're working with people. Things like focus groups, discussions, surveys, and multiple measures. I always think are better. That it's better to if you're going to do a survey. Do the survey, but then schedule a time to sit down with participants and if not all of them, at least a few, and get some feedback and discuss aspects of the project. I think that's helpful. Align it with your needs section. That again can give you some baseline data, what you hope the project will accomplish. Have a plan that's detailed in the evaluation section. Like every month, the project director will meet with project staff and we'll discuss, you know what I mean? Just it's letting the funder know that there's a plan in place. You're going to have a schedule. You're going to meet weekly or bi-weekly or whatever it is to talk about the project, talk about the successes, the challenges, those kinds of things. So again, you want to have, I feel like evaluation, it's helpful to have a table that has and I've mentioned this before, but you can list the objective, the numbers, and then you have maybe the types of measures you're going to use for that objective, timeline, and then the person responsible. I also would strongly advocate that you include a section in your evaluation plan about applying for IRB. I think anytime you have human beings involved in your project and you're going to be collecting data from them, it's essential to get IRB approval. It helps cover you. It helps you know that you have ethical protocols, and it provides, I think, a peace of mind for your funder, for them to know that you're going to adhere to ethical data collection, and that you have plans in place for storing the data, and so that you don't have to detail all of that in your evaluation plan, which would maybe take up a little bit too much room. If they know that you're going through the IRB process or you've already gone through it, then I think that helps cover that. And then I just thought I'd mention other things I've done recently that I think are really helpful, which are things like even including you taking photographs, including those. In a recent project that I did, I would send every week a set of photographs. This was for the Department of State. And what's interesting is they actually use those and a lot of times share those with Congress. And so it gives them some leverage when they go to the people who are the individuals who help provide the funding to the for their programs that then go into the grant funds. You know, it's ways for them to sort of see like visually tangible events, and I would write a bit of a narrative with each photograph to kind of let them know what's going on. And that's another key thing, is that you want to include a schedule for reports. Undoubtedly, with every grant project, you're going to have a final report that's an overall, you know, again, that gets into that summative or outcome evaluation data. But I also think it's good if you sort of make a plan to communicate periodically with your grant officer at the funding agency, to kind of let them know how things are going and to kind of check in with them, and to sort of specify that in the plan that you do plan to provide a you know, monthly or bi-monthly update. Sometimes it's not, you know, you might not do that through the entire project if you know, the first 3 months are just kind of gathering data or supplies or something. But you know, at certain intervals, you would want to communicate through reports or some sort of feedback loop that you'd want to create. And in evaluation sections, I've seen people use different graphics for these, and you know, the way that some of the evaluation cycles are going to work, and all that I think is helpful when you have a visual, something to help the grant reviewer understand. So hope this is helpful, and I'll try to provide some more notes, and I might even try to, I did send you guys 2 documents that have examples of evaluation plans, and I could try to send some additional graphics and information. So